Welcome back to the deep dive. I am so glad you could join us today because we have something truly wild on the agenda.
Yeah, wild is definitely the right word for this one. I'm really excited to get into it.
Same here. But if you are joining us right now, I want you to completely let go of everything you know about human daily life.
Just throw it right out the window.
Seriously, forget your morning coffee, forget your commute, forget the way you communicate with your coworkers. We are looking at a highly speculative, absolutely fascinating document translated for today's discussion as the placeholder text.
Right, and it's quite a read.
It really is. Our mission today is to unpack the exact biological, structural, and cultural overhauls that would be required for humanity to survive entirely underwater as a brand new species.
Basically, the hypothetical evolution of Homo sapiens benthos.
Exactly.
And I want to establish right away that it is a complete systemic reimagining of physics, biology, and sociology. This isn't just, a fun thought experiment about holding our breath longer or strapping on some advanced scuba gear.
No, not at all.
The scenario presented here is radically grounded in reality. If humanity were forced into a localized or even widespread divergence into an aquatic environment, we would be up against the crushing despair of oceanic life.
Yeah, the literal crushing despair.
Right, we're addressing everything from thermoregulation to literal existential pressure.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the biological overhaul, because the physical changes are just staggering. I think everyone's first thought when they imagine underwater humans is gills.
Oh, of course.
We've seen it in a million sci-fi movies, water-breathing superheroes and all that. But the author shuts that down immediately. Why are gills entirely out of the question for us?
It basically comes down to basic biological mathematics and the realities of human metabolism.
The surface area to volume ratio, right?
Exactly. For an endothermic or warm-blooded mammal of our mass, gills present a total nightmare. We simply cannot extract enough oxygen from the water through gills to sustain our massive brain function and metabolic needs.
So they would just be too small.
To make gills actually work, they would have to be unfathomably enormous, to the point where we wouldn't even look vaguely human anymore.
Right. So if gills are out, how do we breathe? Like, what is the alternative here?
The biological modeling suggests we would develop a highly vascularized, permeable dermal layer.
So breathing through our skin.
Basically, yeah. Our skin would adapt to allow for limited cutaneous gas exchange directly through it, somewhat like certain amphibians do. But even that isn't enough to power a human body. We would also develop specialized auxiliary lungs.
But not just for breathing. Right. Because I was fascinated by this part. They take on a completely different mechanical function.
They do. They would function essentially as built-in buoyancy compensators.
Like a swim bladder in a fish.
Very similar to that, yes.
Mm.
You would inflate or deflate these auxiliary lungs to control your position in the water column. And that shift in how we handle buoyancy and gravity fundamentally changes human architecture.
Because we aren't fighting terrestrial gravity anymore.
Exactly. Without gravity constantly pulling us down against a hard surface, our rigid skeletal structure becomes completely redundant. It actually becomes a nuisance, prone to snapping under extreme pressure.
Wow.
So the evolutionary adaptation points toward cartilaginous skeletons, similar to sharks.
Which means we'd be incredibly flexible, like we could squeeze through tight coral reefs or kelp forests.
Flexible, yes, but at a massive structural cost. Your posture would be completely ruined.
No more standing up straight.
The concept of standing up straight, having a defined, rigid spine, simply ceases to exist. We would be in a constant state of fluid suspension.
And it gets better or worse depending on how you look at it. To survive the frigid temperatures of the ocean abyss, the human body has to handle extreme cold. The deep ocean is freezing.
It is entirely unforgiving.
So how does the body compensate for that environment without freezing to death?
Thermal insulation is mandatory here. We are talking about a robust layer of subcutaneous adipose tissue,
Blubber.
thick blubber, distributed evenly across the entire body.
So any modern terrestrial beauty standards, throw them out the window, they are hilariously obsolete.
Completely irrelevant.
In strictly hydrodynamic terms, the ideal underwater human form is unabashedly spherical. You have to picture this sleek, blubber-rich silhouette. The source actually describes it as looking like a perpetually startled manatee.
A very apt description.
Just a very round, very buoyant creature. Oh, and obviously, our hands and feet would be highly webbed for propulsion.
It's a profound morphological overhaul. But the true tragedy of aquatic locomotion isn't just how we look, it's how we move. Every single motion is entirely dictated by fluid dynamics.
Right. I want you, the listener, to picture your morning routine right now. Imagine you are running late for a crucial morning meeting. You grab your things, you sprint out the door, you're rushing down the street. Underwater, that entire concept of rushing is a physiological impossibility.
You literally cannot do it.
Why can't we just swim really fast?
Because of the kinematic viscosity of salt water. To put that in everyday terms, imagine trying to run while chest deep in a swimming pool.
Oh, that awful sluggish feeling.
You feel that immense drag pulling against your legs. Now multiply that drag and apply it to every single movement you make. Water is incredibly dense. Any sudden jerky movements,
Like sprinting,
or even quickly turning around to grab something you dropped, would cost immense amounts of caloric energy. You simply cannot dart around. Because of this energy cost, society would be forced to move with an agonizing, forced sluggishness.
everything would happen in slow motion. You're just slowly, gracefully, agonizingly floating toward your boss's office while they slowly glare at you.
It'd be a very slow glare.
Which brings us to our senses, because how we perceive the world and each other completely changes. Let's talk about the face. To see in the photic and aphotic zones, the areas of the ocean with very little to absolutely zero sunlight, our eyes have to undergo some extreme ocular engineering.
They really do.
They would balloon into these massive hypersensitive orbs.
Equipped with a tapetum lucidum. If you've ever shined a flashlight at a cat in the dark and seen their eyes glow, that's the tapetum lucidum.
Right, the glowing eye thing.
It is a reflective layer behind the retina that bounces faint, stray photons back through the eye a second time. It maximizes whatever tiny amount of light is available in the abyss. However, maintaining massive ocular organs and processing that visual data in the dark requires a massive caloric cost.
The end result is an entire population that perpetually looks like they have just consumed an inadvisable amount of synthetic caffeine. Just massive, glowing, unblinking eyes staring through the glue.
It's quite the visual.
And hearing changes just as drastically.
That is due to the acoustic impedance mismatch. For anyone who has ever tried to talk to a friend underwater at the local pool, it just sounds like muffled, garbled nonsense.
Yeah, you can't understand a word.
That is the acoustic impedance mismatch. Air and water handle sound waves completely differently. Sound actually travels much faster and more efficiently in dense liquids than it does in air. But our current ears are designed to catch sound waves moving through air.
So our ears change shape entirely.
Inside, yes. Our auditory ossicles, the tiny, delicate bones in our middle ear that vibrate when sound hits them, would fuse together. We wouldn't hear through our ear canals the way we do now. We would rely entirely on bone conduction.
You would literally feel the sound vibrating through your skull. You wouldn't just hear someone calling your name. You would feel the physical vibration of their voice in your jawbone.
Exactly.
And speaking of voice, dense liquid makes our vocal cords totally useless for nuanced speech. You can't articulate a complex sentence or a witty joke underwater.
The physics just don't allow for it.
So speech gets replaced. We'd use a complex system of pharyngeal clicks, low-frequency rumbles, and here's where it gets really interesting. Bioluminescent chromatophores embedded right in our skin.
This is perhaps the most profound sociological shift we encounter in this entire thought experiment. We are talking about specialized skin cells that can change color and emit light, acting as a direct extension of our communication and our emotional state.
Much like a cuttlefish.
Exactly like a cuttlefish.
It's the unmutable mood ring. Think about that for a second. You are sitting at your desk, or floating at your coral console, I should say. You are drafting a highly passive-aggressive corporate email.
As one does.
Right, but you can't hide your frustration because your forehead is flashing a furious neon magenta for the whole office to see. Or imagine you make a tiny mistake in front of a crowd and feel mildly embarrassed. Instead of just blushing, you involuntarily illuminate the surrounding 10 cubic meters of water in bright, glowing light.
Everyone knows exactly how you feel.
There are no secrets.
What's fascinating here is how the sheer impossibility of concealing your emotional state completely revolutionizes sociology. Our entire terrestrial society is built on a certain level of emotional regulation, concealment, and white lies.
We smile when we're annoyed, we nod when we're bored.
Precisely. When your skin acts as a high-definition mood ring that you literally cannot turn off, human diplomacy becomes an absolute nightmare.
And the game of poker. Completely obsolete. You can't bluff a bad hand when your chin is glowing a dishonest shade of green.
It really would change everything about how we interact.
So we've got these glowing, slow-moving, manatee-shaped humans communicating via clicks and light flashes. Where do they live? Constructing metropolitan hubs beneath the waves is a logistical nightmare that would drive any terrestrial civil engineer to immediate madness.
Traditional metallurgy is out entirely. It would succumb instantly to galvanic corrosion. Salt water acts as a massive electrolyte, stripping electrons from metal, oxidizing it, and turning steel to rust and much in a fraction of the time it takes on land.
So no steel beams.
You cannot build a modern city out of steel and glass underwater. It has to be organic.
So cities are grown, not built. We would use genetically modified hyper-accelerated polyps to cultivate massive, hollowed-out coral structures, calcium carbonate high-rises.
And they would have to be architecturally stunning.
Organically curved to withstand hydrodynamic drag and strong ocean currents. But there's a catch. They would be slightly slimy to the touch, constantly covered in a thin biofilm. And because it's coral, your apartment building would be highly prone to being absent-mindedly grazed upon by swarms of rogue, oversized parrotfish.
Just another part of the ecosystem.
You'd be sleeping and hear a giant fish just crunching on your living room wall.
It's a completely different urban ecosystem. And we have to consider how urban sprawl works when you remove gravity. Real estate valuation extends three-dimensionally.
Up and down.
Up and down become just as relevant, if not more so, than north and south. You aren't just worried about the neighbors next door. You have neighbors floating 30 feet directly above your roof and 30 feet below your floor.
Zoning laws would be a trip. And getting around those 3D neighborhoods, the wheel is a tragically useless invention in a fluid medium. You aren't driving a sedan to the grocery store.
No, commuting takes on a whole new form.
Picture the new, unremarkable standard of middle-class mediocrity for a commuter. You are clinging to a saddled, heavily armored sturgeon, just riding a massive, grumpy fish to work.
Or using technology.
Right. If you're a bit more tech-oriented, you're using a personal hydrojet propulsion backpack to blast through the water column.
This changes the very nature of neighborly interactions. We mentioned zoning laws earlier. A neighborhood dispute reaches entirely new depths when you share your environment with marine megafauna.
Literally. Instead of complaining about your human neighbor playing loud music, you are engaged in intense legal arguments with a local pod of cetaceans, whales, or dolphins over the persistent, unauthorized use of military-grade biological sonar in residential areas after midnight.
It's a noise complaint on a biological level.
I just love the idea of serving a dolphin with a noise complaint because they kept pinging your coral apartment at 3 a.m.
We would have to integrate directly with the existing marine ecosystem, rather than just paving a concrete highway over it. But while we might adapt our commute and our housing, there's one area where a profound, unmitigated tragedy strikes humanity.
The culinary landscape.
Yes, the loss of fire.
It sounds so simple, but the physics of combustion are fundamentally incompatible with an aqueous environment. Which means the absolute cornerstone of all things crispy, roasted, baked, and joyful, the Maillard reaction is utterly unattainable.
Gone.
Fire just becomes a bizarre myth, a legend whispered among the bioluminescent kelp forests.
The Maillard reaction is that chemical reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars that gives brown food its distinctive flavor. It's the crust on a steak, the golden brown of a French fry, the aroma of toasted bread.
All the good stuff.
We are biologically wired to crave it because it signifies dense, safe, cooked calories. Without heat, without those chemical reactions, the human diet is drastically restricted. We would rely entirely on raw, enzymatically fermented, or chemically cooked proteins.
Chemically cooked.
We'd have to use the highly acidic effluents from deep-sea thermal vents to denature the proteins in our food, essentially cooking it with acid instead of heat.
So sushi ceases to be an overpriced weekend delicacy. It becomes a mundane, inescapable, thrice-daily chore, and agriculture shifts forcefully. Goodbye wheat, goodbye corn, goodbye potatoes. Hello high-yield macroalgae and genetically bloated benthic krill.
A very different pantry.
I want you to take a moment and genuinely imagine the generational despair here. Never knowing the structural integrity of a freshly baked baguette, never smelling a bakery. Instead, you wake up and enthusiastically spread fermented sea cucumber paste onto a gelatinous slab of compressed spirulina. It is a bleak, slimy culinary existence.
And the mechanics of consuming that food, and particularly beverages, pose a fascinating thermodynamic paradox. How does an organism drink a liquid while completely immersed in a liquid?
It sounds like a riddle. If you pour a glass of water underwater, it just mixes with the ocean? The evolutionary workaround for this is intense. It would likely involve specialized, highly pressurized ingestion pouches, plus a socially acceptable amount of blowback.
It wouldn't be pretty.
No, formal dining isn't delicately sipping wine from a crystal glass. It devolves into a violently messy affair. You are aggressively squirting nutrient paste directly into your esophagus, trying not to let the ocean water get in, all while trying to maintain polite, bioluminescent eye contact with your dinner date.
A complete reinvention of table etiquette.
Yeah.
And that reinvention extends directly to personal hygiene and daily culture. The foundational pillars of modern civilization, sanitation and cleanliness, require a massive conceptual overhaul when you are perpetually submerged.
Taking a bath is a philosophical paradox. You're already wet. How do you clean yourself when the water around you is the very thing you live in?
That's a real issue.
And the logistics of underwater plumbing. Terrifying. It's hard to even contemplate how a sewer system works when everything floats. So waste management would heavily rely on highly efficient bioengineered symbiotic bacterial mats that break down waste instantly.
And local fauna.
Right, perhaps more uncomfortably, an unspoken reliance on swarms of bottom-feeding crustaceans employed by the city sanitation department. The crabs are basically the garbage trucks. You just drop your trash, and a swarm of specialized crabs scurries over and dismantles it.
Daily life is further complicated by the environment itself. In the deeper, sunless settlements of the aphotic zone, there are no defined day-night cycles. No sun rising in the east or setting in the west to regulate our circadian rhythms.
Without sunlight to trigger melatonin production, society would adopt a chaotic, polyphasic circadian rhythm. You sleep when you can for short bursts, floating in a tethered sleep pod.
Just resting whenever possible.
The result is an entire civilization of perpetually grumpy, sporadically flashing insomniacs, just a glowing, tired workforce drifting around.
But even grumpy insomniacs need culture to thrive. Art and entertainment naturally adapt to the viscous medium. Traditional painting on a canvas is physically impossible unless you have highly advanced hydro-repellent materials. And even then, the friction of the water would ruin the brushstrokes.
So we get a cultural renaissance of three-dimensional fluid dynamic sculpting, manipulating water currents and temperature gradients to create invisible, swirling art pieces that you can only feel. Or competitive synchronized bubble blowing. Or just arranging aesthetically pleasing sedimentary rocks in the sand.
And a fashion industry completely collapses.
Loose clothing is a disaster underwater. It creates immense hydrodynamic drag, slowing you down even more. And even worse, fabrics provide excellent hiding spots for parasitic ocean copepods. You do not want ocean bugs taking up residence inside your tailored suit.
The zenith of underwater haute couture shifts away from fabrics entirely. It becomes about body modification and symbiosis. Wearing garments is out, modifying your skin is in. Picture intricately shaved, geometric patterns into your protective layer of symbiotic algae.
Or if you are part of the wealthy elites seeking a more textured, avant-garde aesthetic, you opt for the strategic, painful attachment of decorative, polished barnacles. High fashion means blinging out your blubber with shiny sea crust.
It's a status symbol.
So what does this all mean? We have these glowing, algae-shaved, manatee humans eating sea cucumber paste and riding sturgeons. What is the mental toll of this existence?
The psychological ramifications cannot be overstated. You are living in an environment that is actively, continuously trying to crush, freeze, or dissolve you at all times. The sheer weight of the water column above you is immense.
It's terrifying.
The baseline level of human anxiety would inevitably skyrocket just to accommodate the surrounding hydrostatic pressure. Our brains would be constantly wired for survival in a hostile void.
So agoraphobia wouldn't be a mental health disorder. It would be the standard, healthy, evolutionary response to the pelagic void. Think about stepping out of your coral apartment. You look up, and there's just a gradient of fading blue light leading to an absolute ceiling you can never break through. You look down, and it's an unfathomable, pitch-black abyss populated by ancient creatures composed entirely of bioluminescence, teeth, and malice.
Of course, you'd be terrified of open spaces.
The economy reflects this harsh reality, too.
It wouldn't be based on gold or fiat currency. It would likely be driven by the desperate hoarding of rare hydrothermal vent minerals essential for survival, or trading artificially stabilized oxygen canisters in chaotic bazaars anchored to the jagged sides of submerged abyssal trenches. It is an existence of extreme pressure, literally and figuratively.
Yet despite all of this, despite the complete lack of crispy potatoes and the death of the bakery, despite the infuriating inability to ever truly dry off or feel a warm towel, despite the constant lingering threat of giant cephalopods treating your daily morning sturgeon commute like an all-you-can-eat buffet, Homo sapiens benthos perseveres. The source material is very clear on this. Humanity survives, we adapt.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights our most defining trait, our complaining resilience. We wouldn't just survive, we would carry our terrestrial stubbornness right down to the ocean floor. We would normalize the absurd.
We absolutely would. Instead of complaining about the rain ruining our weekend plans, we'd complain about the microplastic salinity levels ruining our algae farm. Instead of dreading Monday morning traffic jams on the highway, we would deeply dread the seasonal migration of the stinging gelatinous siphonophore swarms blocking the express currents on our way to work.
We just adapt what we complain about.
We are, essentially, highly adaptable, complaining barnacles. The human spirit will attach itself to absolutely anything and refuse to let go, no matter how ridiculously wet, cold, slow, and pressurized the circumstances may be.
This raises an important question, though, something to consider long after we wrap up this discussion. If our very culture, our art, our diet, and our sociology are completely dictated by our physical environment and our biological limitations, at what point of adaptation does a species cease to be human?
That is the big question.
If we were ever forced to migrate to a completely alien environment, whether that is the crushing depths of the deep ocean or the zero-gravity vacuum of deep space, would our descendants still share the same core internal humanity as you and I? Or would the extreme environment inevitably forge a completely unrecognizable alien consciousness?
A fascinating and slightly terrifying thought to leave you with today. Thank you so much for diving into the abyss with us, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.